going at it. Gordon's tack and Drysdale.
Well, do you see what started it?
Mm-hmm.
That Drysdale. I don't know where this came from. It's like he was answering a question, but I don't know who was asking, or maybe he just did it of like who are the most successful teams in jiu-jitsu, and he like named everybody, and then like Atos and Gracie Baja, and I don't remember who else he named. And then he was like, there's also guys like the Danaher Death Squad or the Danaher guys, I think is what he said.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of like downplayed them winning. And I was like, well, that's not, he did that on purpose. I mean, there was no question as to what was going on there.
Gordon's relentless right now.
Yeah. Well, so are the Flow guys. Michael Swears. I started following him, and he's kind of funny now. And dude, he went after Drysdale as well. Just saying, oh, he's just jealous, and he wrote this book that nobody cares about, and I don't know.
Flow is basically Gordon Ryan.
Yeah.
I think he owns part of that thing now.
Yeah. Kind of funny. Man, there's like all things, there's a lot of hate that goes on sometimes, and animosity.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? It adds interest to it, and
makes it better.
It's fine. It's fine. I think the biggest thing is like in terms of just like raw medal count. Sure, like Atos and Checkmat and Alliance, and they have win a lot of IBJJF Opens and a lot of medals, but they've got like 1,000 times the number of people as Danaher has. I mean, he's like it's a small group of people,
Yeah.
And then same thing with like the Daisy Fresh guys that are the Pedigo guys that are coming up now, and a relatively small team, but they're showing up and with fewer numbers, but like winning a ton of medals and competing on team titles and stuff. And so I don't know. It's just that whole whose team is, it's just anyway.
I know.
You could have that battle just all day long with anything,
change,
over
and over.
Yeah. Oh, but back here, GreenStrength podcast, Coach Luke, how are you today?
Tired, but I'm here. I'm good.
There's a lot that I've started to learn about you. I've known you for a while now, but I'm starting to learn more and more about your background and your history, and it's an interesting history that you've got. And I think a lot of people probably don't know. They know Coach Luke, and they love to work with you. A lot of clients that you've been working with for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think it's time to put you on the spot and let you tell your story, kind of your background, because you've been in, air quoting here, the industry for quite a long time. And I know you probably have some thoughts on what the industry even means, but man, you've learned a lot along the way. You've got a lot of interesting stories that I think people can at least learn from or understand why your philosophy and why GreenStrength is what it is today based on that. And so I think people would love to hear about who you are, where you came up, and where you got started. I think that's where we should get started, is just you, when you first started working in a gym, training others, what was that like? What was your philosophy like? Tell us about how you got started. Set the stage for us when you first got into that.
I grew up playing sports, but not the only competitive real sport I played was hockey, and that was roller hockey, which kind of had an end when I was around 16, 17 years old. And I spent those last couple of years of high school. I lost my father when I was going into my senior year in high school. So those last, year and first couple of years into college just became kind of just partying all the time and not really ever doing anything athletic, and just being wild. So that had a time of where I started to kind of get sick of that. I started to go to the gym. There was a place, Transformation Fitness there in Edmond. And I would go there with a couple of my friends, and I started lifting, and I kind of had these two different worlds. I had my party world, and then I had the world in the gym. And so they were still interchanged for a long time. But the interesting thing about like anybody who works in a gym, whether you work almost like front desk or you're personal training, like anybody who gets I don't want to call them low level, but just the basic CPT certification training. Like everybody at that time in your life, and at that, that green moment of who you are as a teacher or just an employee, you think like so much. You think you have it figured out at least, and now you want to tell everybody. It's like, so I was getting into that, and I had a few people who would listen to me, but mainly still during this time, I had the opportunity to kind of like work underneath. And there was a guy in transformation who was doing all the athlete training, was like head of personal training and all that, and his name was Patrick Wellington, and I believe he came from UCO and stuff back then. But he ran a really, like, it was badass in this. It was a health club, but like we had our own little crews in there and stuff, and he trained some athletes, and I would get to jump in with those groups. And so I kind of started training and seeing how some of the professional baseball players train and stuff. And we kind of fast forward through that time of when I really just started working out, and I was sick of partying. I was sick of like balancing both these worlds, and I kind of traded the nightlife and the drinking addiction into the working out addiction. And that's one of the biggest reasons, and a lot of these stories that we're about to talk about are kind of exactly why I'm always talking about like the psychological side of things, because I see it in the gym with everybody in some form or fashion. But so I had a period of time there, transformations, doing all sorts of stuff. And then I was just getting too big for my own britches. Me and a friend, we were like going to a couple other gyms, and there was this place called Tannique, and that is where like all the shit happened. That's where the biggest, baddest mofos, female, male, physique competitors, and just overall, this is that hardcore gym that all of them were at. And when any type of place like that pretty much offers like a month to month, like $30 membership, which so I went over there, and I got a job at the front desk of Tannique. And I mean, dude, this was like literally the members were on a Rolodex card. Like we would make cards for people and just like check. And it was like cash under the table. There was favors that would go on for tannings, because this was a big old tanning booths, like tons of tanning booths. They sold, I'll get back to that, favors that would go on. I was not a part of any of this stuff, but there were people in there that would definitely, like barter things for stuff that should not be going on in a gym, whether it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, pretty much. But everybody's fucking jacked. Like that's the world. So, I came in with like a pretty good background to a lot of like training. Like I was getting bigger. I was around like almost 200 pounds at that time. And I knew a lot, and I had the right influences. Like I had the teachers, the coaches that I was following and like reading. I had good influences, but then I got into this environment, and you're starting to like live in this environment. It's like, man, I want to be jacked like that. Like or I want to be strong, and like I want to throw shit around like these guys.
So this is like one of these places you walk in, crowded with people.
Yeah.
Everybody's huge.
Dude,
everybody's tan.
Everybody's huge. I mean, yeah. And this isn't even like Mr. Olympia's people. These are professional IFBB bodybuilders and stuff in there. But just everybody's jacked, man. It's an environment where everybody's down in protein shakes, and they're taking all sorts of stuff. And I learned that real quick. Before I came over there, I had started to kind of like my transition over there was I was lifting with a couple guys, and we started getting into some shit. We stopped partying and drinking all the time, but we started finding out about the drugs on the performance enhancing side of things. And we actually had made trenbolone acetate, which is a steroid. And we like, what do we do? See, back then you were able to like buy the phenotabs like from the cattle, right? And so there's these kits you used to be able to get and like basically do your own chemistry, right? So this guy lived on he was I don't know what he did. He had like a little apartment in this farmhouse, right? So we were able to ship it there because they put like tracking on this stuff. They check it every once in a while. They're like, okay, why is a bunch of cattle stuff, cattle steroids here going to this house in like Edmond in the middle of a neighborhood? Let's go check that out. So we had started to dabble into stuff. And like when you put that kind of shit in your body, man, like especially when the intention is like in my young self and like I'm like trying to block out a bunch of stuff I was going through. This is fun. Like you just recover more, you start feeling stronger. You're young, so you're stupid, you're getting emotionally invested into it. And then you look around, you transition over to technique and you're around all these people and you just start seeing like, man, I'm just in the beginning. I'm like a small dog with this, you know. Um, I'm not gonna say anybody's names, but when I got over there, I started like getting I definitely had I looked at the top trainer and I remember buying a nutritional package from him and it was basically just you know an undulating it just every week it added a little bit more food, you know. If it was like half a sweet potato, the next week it's 3/4 and it's going up, and it was 6 meals a day, a couple shakes, and just pounding food like a bodybuilder, right? And I was curious about the drugs, so simple, ask them, hey, this much gives me a full, a cycle.
Basically, you've got now your gym doctor who's
Yeah, and this is stuff that I look at now that I'm really really passionate about, and I'll get into. But it was the easiest thing in the world. Okay, you need this much money. I don't know shit about this stuff, but you know everything. You got everybody in here. Okay, give it to me. I'll start eating this fucking food every day, and I'll take this stuff. Now, even though we had started playing with stuff and making our own thing, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. Like we didn't know shit. So when I took this stuff, this was like my first real, what I would say, like drug usage in anabolic steroids. And I'm like 22, 23, I think it was 23. And dude, I went from like 195 to my heaviest was 234 and not very long. Everything I was doing in the gym. Now I look at like, dude, this was nothing great technique. It was just sheer. You're young, you're throwing shit around, and you're just fucking swelling up because you're putting all this stuff in you.
At that point, everything you did worked.
Everything you do, yeah. But they know no different. The artistry of where bodybuilding is like lost, and that's like, see, I was following great bodybuilders, but that's reading, and you can't ever get the context. If all those bodybuilders that I'm following, they're reading their writings and stuff, if they could have gotten with me, they would have never let me take the drug until I was probably 30 years old. And they would have just slapped me with this daily discipline of those small hinges that swing big doors like we're talking about. And to them, it's like swelling up muscles and stuff, and getting jacked is like that's an art. You got to just, learn to create and get every inch that you can until the next thing comes. And a lot of those guys, of course, they had big drug usage, but it came eventually when big drug usage had to come. And do I go further, or am I done here? No, I'm going to take it further. But those, that's a totally different world than getting in where there's a bunch of uneducated people, a bunch of egos, same position I've been in as a trainer now, literally maybe taking money from somebody that I know is not going to really follow the program. So for sure, I'll write your program, and that's just kind of how it was. But they don't know any difference besides we just keep hammering this nail and shit happens. The strong survive, and that's a lot of sports. That's the majority of sports we play. That's what we try to talk about in here is like what, the ones who make it through, but the majority of us are going to have some setbacks, and we've got to start realizing that we're all different and, that kind of stuff. But so the drug usage, I'll get through this story pretty quick. That time was wild, man. It was a 16-week cycle, and I remember the whole thing. And like an uneducated kid that I was, at the end, I was just following orders like I was told. And I tried the post-cycle therapy stuff, and it was horrible. Like it tasted like shit. And so like my dumb ass literally just was like, fuck this. I don't want it. So this gym was a mess, man. It was pretty crazy. So the owner would like he had like was it what were those jeans? It was like 7 jeans. You know those jeans that
Yeah.
they had like a knockoff like 7 jeans and like fake Gucci purses and stuff. So you walk in, if you look at the left, it's like here's the knock. It's like a flea market meets supplementation, like every protein drink you can have, full out tanning bed, and then just like this is where everybody who wants to pay $25 a month, $30 a month,
And
whatever,
have the
and just
big
do
gym with
whatever
all
you
the
want. It's the place. So it was very much like that, and very unstable environment. There's a lot of stories that could go on for days about that place, but the owner was very unstable, and we kind of everybody in there basically had to kind of get out of there at one point. He would he was using some drugs pretty hard at that time, and like we'd come there in the morning and we'd open up doing some stuff. He'd come in, put some McDonald's down on the table, and then leave and come back. He'd either be like a little drunk or coked up or something. Who's fucking McDonald's is? And he'd go nuts and just so that kind of stuff. And then so he basically threatened us and kicked a couple of us out of there. And so that was the time when we were like, all right, screw this place. And I actually went back to transformations, and that was like a fun, weird time in my life because that was honestly I remember how egotistical like, and I know so many people do this every day. So like people don't even going back. I'm gonna go back to my home gym, and now I'm fucking jacked. You know what I mean? It's like, and I remember people that knew me there because it was a short stint over the other place. It wasn't that long. Um, but some people still, all the regulars knew me, and it was just like, holy crap! Like, what'd you do? You know, the irony looking at that now is a lot of people thought I had secrets. Oh, this dumbass kid just took a bunch of drugs and just trained all day, every day, and did nothing else. Yeah, so
but
there's the secrets, but it
but
glamours them.
but you have in your head that like, yeah, I have figured it out.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That's what you're
yeah,
telling
yeah.
yourself.
You think you figured everything out for sure, for sure. So I'm back at transformations. I'd say I'm getting a little bit better. Like I'm kind of looking for more direction in life at this time. Um, I wanted to start training. I was getting down that. I'd lost a little bit of size. Like I was back to about 215 pounds, but I was like feeling better. And then I started feeling like shit. And I'm kind of making a long story short, but over time, I started feeling really bad and just weak, lethargic, and then frustrated, not being able to sleep because I'm thinking about it and stuff. And I start watching my body weight, and it starts going from like 215, and all of a sudden I'm like 195 pounds, and it goes down a little bit lower, and I'm like, okay, this is fucking crazy. Like, what is going on? I stopped going to the gym. I was hiding from the gym because I'm just like, dude, I literally like, I remember getting buckled on a leg press machine. Like I had no strength, like stamina and stuff. You know what I mean? Just like weird things that kept me like I got out of there quick. And so then I went psycho mode. I'm like, what is going on? Get to a regular doctor, regular family physician who known me for a long time. Definitely lied to him.
No, I hadn't been taking
No, I
anything.
hadn't been doing anything. And now I think it's so funny because I remember telling my mother several times that I hadn't, and then other people that I hadn't. And it was like that point where it's just like, okay, I saw you a year ago. Like come on, Luke. So that kind of stuff is funny because we see that everybody does that kind of shit. But so I go to him, I lie the first time, then I realize I'm an idiot. I go back and I'm like, look, this is what I've done, and he doesn't know anything about this stuff besides like here at this time TRT was first starting to come out, and TRT was like gel. This is called androgel,
Androgel, right?
and so he gives me androgel, and I start taking transdermal testosterone, right? So of course I start to feel better. Like everything changes. I mean, instantly. Because I'll backtrack in a second, but everything changes instantly, and I kind of hold some weight back, and I start feeling better. But now, before I'd taken that, when I did my blood work, I've told this story to several friends because they don't understand. Like, I'm like, dude, I was at it was at 127, basically, was my total testosterone. And super, super, just kept plummeting down, right? Like my bones would hurt. Like my bone mineral density felt different. This is why I stayed out of the gym. And when I was going down, took the androgel, it was like Barry Bonds. That's the shit they were doing. Not
Yeah.
androgel, but they were doing the cream and stuff. And I just, not got jacked again, but I held weight and I like was back to like 180 pounds and stuff. But then this shit taught me more in this field than a lot of things, because at this moment we kind of found a solution. This is a short time, only about a month into this. And I started noticing, you just raise testosterone levels and we're not looking at like estradiol and other, estrogen and other hormones. And so I started noticing like I was getting very like holding water retention and things like that. And I knew like I was building up estrogen, the common side effect of that, but I didn't have the drugs, to combat this or anything. And then, so I get in with the endocrinologist who everybody recommends. Go to him. He's like, oh, no, here's what you need to be doing. So he gives me this entirely different thing, which is a drug called HCG. If anybody knows about that stuff, they'll know what's going on there. But his dosage that he gave me was way too high. It was way too aggressive. I started doing research, my own black market research, and I start finding out, and I'm like, well, this isn't good. It's clearly here. So I bring it to his attention. I'm like, hey, man, this is just making me aromatize estrogen, which is furthering plummeting the testosterone. So on one hand, it's even though you're taking something that's building up testosterone, if that relationship between estrogen and testosterone, gets a little crazy, then it starts doing the opposite in a way. So this guy basically says that he literally told me he didn't say I didn't know what I was talking about, but he said that what I told him was not true. And I was like, okay. So hung up the phone with him. And I literally got on at this time where I was finding this stuff out. The funny part about this is I'm total black market. I'm total down in deep steroid underground forums, talking and consulting through, Western Unioning money to people that had lost their medical license, doing shit. But they knew what was up.
Because they played around it so
played
much.
around in that stuff. And they're the only people that could really like help, but they can't do anything. So there's this weird world where this guy, I finally had this one original gangster, dude. This guy, and I paid him some good money, dude, but he was giving me like really putting me on like something. I was like, okay, I know when I talk to the right person, I'm going to know. Cause like I got a lot of shit going here. Wants to make two other doctor trips over time. You know how it is to get into doctors, 3-4 months. This is going on for almost over a year and a half of my life. In which I'm just like,
you're just trying to fix
I'm just
yourself.
trying to survive 100% in survival mode, depressed, not, social life, not doing anything like Operation 1, figure out what the fuck is going on. CAT scans, MRIs, we're trying to check everything because of what happened. For those who don't know, is just, it's like, it was just what's called hypogonadism. It's, you're basically messing with your nervous system, your pituitary gland and all that, and you're shutting down the body's ability to produce its own natural testosterone. And everybody knows when they take something, the body starts to, it's like a thermometer. Okay. So you've got to, totally making up numbers, but you've got a certain amount of testosterone. And if you start injecting some or taking some transdermal testosterone, then your body's like, well, I don't need to make as much. And it starts to do that. Now, when you start taking it away, the body does have to go down a little bit, but it still backfires back up. So a lot of times there are these periods where people lose their gains and go down and have depression and stuff. But really, moderate usage in steroid cycles are not going to mess somebody up too bad. God, I know I'm not a doctor, but you know what I mean? It's
all
like
all the caveats here.
Is a modern dosage of alcohol that bad? No, but drink a 12-pack.
Right.
So it's
the more extreme you take it, the more extreme
Exactly.
effect it's going to have on the body.
So now we get to this point where I got a lot of information. All these doctors don't know what's going on because medically nobody really studies this at the time and stuff. They're not putting their attention into that. And I know it's a common thing now because they're making so much damn money off of it. Everybody's a TRT doc now.
Oh
And
yeah.
no disrespect, but it's like literally in '05, it was like you're out on your own. You
Well,
know?
nobody. It was almost like people didn't want to talk about it. It
Yeah.
was like, well, I don't want to admit that I've got if somebody's going for a therapeutic dose or whatever. But now it's like, come to the men's clinic. Like it's people are
100%.
actually
It's
talking
like
about this
exactly
as
like
like,
the marijuana thing. Like,
yeah,
oh, I don't know if you should. I'm not going to be the doctor that's going to give you that.
right.
And then now it's like, come on over.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
this is so stupid. So coolest part of the story is I go black market. I order a bunch of underground drugs from China.
This is just so
In
wild.
Western Union and money and just hoping it arrives, and I only had one thing that never made it. Like I did this a lot. There's so much backstory in all this, but I'm just kind of being fast. So I Western Union, get all the shit, get this stuff, finally get into this doctor, or I'm going to get into this doctor in Baylor Medical University. And it's 3.5 months away.
But you're kind of treating yourself through
at this
guys
time,
that you've paid that don't have a
at
medical
this
license.
time, yes, I get the stuff. I'm done with talking to any doctor. I'm waiting for this one doctor, and I'm doing my own black market stuff. And life was pretty good, man. I had a 3-month period where I remember meeting some friends, which I hadn't done in a long time, and going to a concert. Like I remember feeling better, like crazy. You know what I mean? Like, and get into this Baylor Medical University, walk in, meet the doctor, and I put all this shit on the table. I said, "This is what I've done. This is my whole timeline. This is everything I've done. This is that damn cycle that I took that I had no idea what it was then,
Just
but
pure
now
honesty.
I know what it is. And we'll get into that in a second. But it's like, here it is. This is what I ordered from, 3 months ago, and been taking it this long." And he's like, "Man, you're doing the right thing, but we got to get you on some legal drugs."
He's like, let's put this over here.
I learned so much about the medical community. Not that anybody was wrong. They just didn't know. I'm pretty sure that all those doctors I saw, if they could have helped me, they would have. But they're also like, "Kid, I don't know what to tell you anymore. Like, this is where my notes tell me to do, and you're on your own. You did this shit to yourself." So, because insurance is like, "Good luck, little boy." They don't care about any of this. So, but anyway, so I start to learn about all these things, and I get on the right medication, and to kind of end that story, like the rest was history. I got going, and got back onto being able to train again. But stepping back, when I did start to meet the right people and I did my own research and like really found out like what a prominent trainer a prominent trainer in Oklahoma, somebody who's very well respected by a lot of people and knows a lot of people. He is good at what he does in creating physiques and stuff for sure, man. I mean, no disrespect, but when I look at it, it's like, how the hell did you let somebody do that? You know what I mean? And not even like check up on them, not even like be a friend. I've never given somebody steroids, but if I ever did, I think I'd want to be like, "Listen, like you've got to be like, you and I have to develop a marriage here in a way." And it's just weird to know that, all right, I got it. I'm out on my own. I do this and I'm able to stop it on my, like, oh, this tastes like shit. I'm not going to do that part. Nobody even like helps me out. And I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, every real pro bodybuilder or drug user, like I said, would have never let me take it till I'm 30 plus years old, and it would have started with one drug, not 6. Somebody to just put a professional bodybuilding like stack on you is what it was. It was just like, whack.
Just dumped everything at once on a kid.
On a kid. Yeah.
Clearly didn't know anything.
So no. But it taught me a lot. It taught me a lesson, big time.
But that's the hard way to learn.
Yeah. But there was so much inside that, because.
Well, I think So here's my question. Do you think, because you just said something that probably people have wondered, and you said, I've
Mhm.
never given anyone steroids, right? So
Yeah.
this is not something that you've done through your careers,
No,
but
this was a one, like pretty much a one time
you
kind
did
of.
to yourself.
Yeah.
But do you think, had that gone differently, right? So maybe you didn't have what ended up being a very long-term traumatic experience that
Yeah.
required a lot for you to go put your body back together. How do you think that would have changed? Like, how do you, and I know we're just guessing here, but if you didn't have that issue, do you think it would have changed your stance on that? Or do you think it would have,
Well, that's weird. I think it would have changed who I am as a person completely. Obviously, all events do, but it, if I would have been okay, like fine, I probably would have used a lot more over years, and I probably would have stayed in that world for a while, and like that's just that's the world that like started making food something more than like performance and fuel and health. It started making food like you better get that shit. I mean, people nowadays like fasting and stuff is so big, but before this, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, like the thought of not eating every couple of hours, like a massive amount of men thought they were going to lose muscle. So like, it started that whole like that's where I saw eating disorders. That's where I saw dysfunctional relationships. That's where I saw trainers just getting away with bullshit and bullshit and bullshit over and over and over. And if I can give you a little drugs, or if I can put you on an extreme diet and also make you show up all the time, doesn't matter what we do, you got to be halfway decent and you get results, you know? Um, and I think I told you where this started when I was talking about the Patrick Wellington guys. Is he was running a program called I was like performance athletics or something like athlete, yeah, something like that. But he had a whole little program, and I had started like studying all this stuff, and I was at the other place, and like I said, the context of everything I knew at the time was like, well, these guys are the real professionals writing these books, and this is what they say is right, and you're not doing any of that stuff. And so I publicly like took shots at him, and I was like trying to show how much I knew. And the funny part about that is years later, when I finally got into my first spot of my own, this is probably probably 5 years after that, was when I started really like training people, like, and like realizing like, okay, I got this group. There's only certain people that can do this and certain people that can do that. I started realizing like, okay, it's not, you can't just do all this stuff with everybody and everything's going to be perfect. And I started looking back in my notes because I had taken tons of notes from all of the workouts that he put everybody through and me through and that I just saw. And I realized that he was push, pull, carry, and squat, unilateral balance. Like he was just building good young athletes. And that hit me pretty hard. You know what I mean? Because I was like, holy shit, man. Like, God, I'm such an idiot. But and I still knew some things. Then I was successful. I was just, like able to get my own gym, able to get things started. I was able to at this time I was, able to train an entire, couple team sports in hockey. So it was interesting to kind of like look back and see that, you know.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I sort of sympathize in my own career, unrelated to fitness or anything, right? Just as an attorney, those first couple of years out of law school, I thought I knew everything. I thought I was like the smartest
Yeah,
lawyer that there ever was,
but
and
your
I knew
experience
everything.
is lacking.
Oh, and then the
That
more I know, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And I
mhm.
think that's that evolution you have to go through of
Yeah.
that ego early on when man, we sound like such old people now. We're like
I mean,
these kids out
gosh.
here. But it really, I mean, it's that concept of you don't know what you don't know. And that just means that the pool of stuff that you think you have to know, you think you know all of it, right? You
Yeah.
think you know
Oh
everything
yeah.
when you don't. And that's, you start to figure that out over time that, man, there's just so much more to this than I ever realized.
Yeah.
And maybe I read this one thing and you thought, well, this is the gospel of getting strong.
Yeah.
But then you slowly got opened up to so many more, plus through your personal experience. I mean, I think, I don't know, this whole concept of getting into Tannic and building your own drugs and then going through that whole process.
And
I can see how that has influenced where you are today to be
it
like, man,
sounds crazy,
it does.
but it's the industry. And there's so many clean people out there, but the industry is just full of this, like full of it. I mean, I remember working out with big old power lifters and all this stuff, and dudes would, back in that time, dudes would have gym bags with a gun and some coke in it and stuff, and it's just like everybody's doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And the weird thing about it is like, and again, there's context behind this. I'm not calling like an entire organization out, but it's just weird when there's just so many regular people, your firemen, your police officers, your teachers and stuff, that just like, we're all human and we all get into subcultures of something. And you really don't view it as bad. I viewed myself at the time as in the health and fitness industry. I viewed myself as like becoming strong, becoming badass, like knowing more than other people. And it's like it's a weird like evolution with that stuff,
Yeah, it is. It's interesting to know that that's out there and that there are people, just ordinary people, that then want to do those things, right?
Yeah.
Because you can understand somebody at the highest level of a sport, right? You're a bodybuilder, you're a professional bodybuilder, and they go into it knowing full well what they're getting into. They've
Yeah.
got protocols and a lot of knowledge to where they're taking that on. They're going to go
Yeah.
down that road of using steroids and other drugs. But then to have just people who just want to look good come in and decide, well, I'm going to do this very unnatural synthetic thing.
Yeah.
To create that.
I know. And that's the weird thing. Where I lost my train of thought a second ago. And like what I was finishing with that was that like I came from alcoholism. Like that was the way I was able to cover all of this up, is I came from alcoholism into working out, and now I had to start seeing that time of when like people like my mom and the doctor, like they don't believe it, because it's like, look at you now. It's like, okay, so there's the extremes we talk about. I didn't just didn't stop drinking. I stopped drinking, and all of a sudden I inflated myself up, and I inflated my ego up with it at the same time. And then it slapped me in the fucking face, and then coming back is what taught me the most. Coming back was when, I was determined. So I'd been out of the weight room for a long time. And I was literally, during this time when I was doing the, getting the other stuff and talking to this guy underground and stuff, when I said I went away, I went away. I went and lived at a house on Lake Keystone. It's giant. I got a family member who's, she's got a giant castle on Lake Keystone. It's wonderful. I lived in this place all by myself for months and months. I studied all day, every day. And I would message and email and all this stuff. And all I started doing was running my ass off. It's the only thing I could do. But then it just became like, okay, I had some inspiring reads that I read. I told you about that, the dean, I can't even remember his last name, but it was he wrote, like, he did 50 marathons in 50 days in 50 different states. Mm-hmm. And he wrote this book, I think it's called like Born to Run or something. And he was on his birthday, he was drunk in a bar, and he found himself, almost like, I might be messing this up, but he just found himself in a place in life that he didn't want to be. Like, he was kind of flirting or talking to some other lady at the bar, and he had a wife at home. And it was just that moment in which he just went out and started running. And then he became the marathon man. And that's what I did. I just started, I was put one foot in front of the other every day. And I had never ran more than probably 2 miles, maybe in my life, 2 or 3 miles, maybe a 5K, something, you know. So this was like scratch from nothing, man. I was 180 pounds after all this traumatic experience and stuff, and and now I have a plan. Now I have a goal, and it is to run. And I had to give myself an actual event. So I signed out just out of nowhere, just signed up for the Chicago Marathon. And that was like October something in '07. And dude, I just went nuts. I got a job at a running store. I came back to Edmond, got a job at a running store, OK Runner. Tim and Gus Johnson, they were Thompson, not Johnson, but dude, they were awesome people. I liked selling shoes in there, and it just like they had a great store. They had a Norman store and an Oklahoma store. The OK Runner guys, they're still around doing it, but I just started living in the runner lifestyle. Like our events were running events, and that I'd have to work with them or whatever, and a couple of really good runners, from college and stuff. This guy who is, I don't know what we could call it, like an elite marathoner. He's an elite marathoner. I think he's like under 225. He's almost won the Chicago Marathon, or not the Chicago, I'm sorry, the Oklahoma City, but he's a local guy, Jerry Faulkner. He's an awesome dude. I worked with him back then. And I just started, like, I would have the chance to run with him and stuff sometimes. And that's just like we do in jujitsu. It's like when we get to train with brown and black belts and stuff, it's like, well, shit, here it goes. But this is an opportunity. And I'm running with guys when they're doing their recovery runs. But to me, it's like, if I can keep up for this 8 miles, that's a 6:30 mile. I mean, we're talking fast runners. So I eat, breathe, and slept running. I surrounded myself with nothing but runners. All I did was start to train, strength training like a runner. I bought like running, strength training for manuals, and it's funny how when we look at all these different niches, you see that like everything that I look at then, because I can still make the meathead arguments, the need for the strength and these other exercises. We can make all those arguments, but what really is the foundation for like running training really showed me bridges, bird dogs, clamshells, balance, stability, ability to have gait pattern, and so it taught me a lot of like how runners really did stuff. Now, the byproduct of this is that Chicago Marathon was 98% humidity and 98 degrees. If you can look it up, 2007 Chicago Marathon. They stopped the race halfway because they ran out of water, and an officer who was running the race had passed out and died. So if you weren't at a certain point by a certain time, they picked everybody up and bussed them to the finish line. I didn't think about any of that. Didn't know about it because I was past a point. I wasn't in that line, but didn't think about anything, dude. Everything I'd gone through in life, still, the funny part of why I look at exercise now, I was still running at that time from stuff from my dad, but it just traveled through different expressions, And so I'm out there trying to stay out of the crowd. So I stay in the middle of the street. And the last couple of days, I was actually walking with Greg when it was really humid here in Oklahoma and hot. And I was kind of like, man, this is the first time I've ever really thought about like it's 93 with, I don't know, we reached like 100% something humidity, whatever, recently. And I'm like, this is pretty replicable conditions to what it was then. And I'm like, man, I stayed out in this sun the whole time and like did this, not taking goo, not drinking very much water and stuff. I mean, I just pure emotion, which is what we talk about, how everybody exercises, and it is not healthy. But I ran a 3 hour and 16-minute marathon. My goal at that time was to break 3:10 to qualify for Boston. So I came back and I was really pissed off. I was disappointed. And I get into the running store and all the runners are like ecstatic, and they were like congratulating me. And I'm like, well, I didn't, do what I wanted to do. And they're like, dude, you ran a 3 hour and 16-minute marathon in those conditions. And I never thought about that, but it was really big. So next week I go running another marathon, um, running under 3 hours, 2 hours and 59 minutes. And then 2 weeks following after that, I tried to do 100 miles through a Turkey Mountain trails down in Tulsa. And that was the end. Like that was where everything fell apart, because before the Chicago one, um, I had a stress fracture in my foot about 3 weeks before the race. And so I did all of my training. Another thing that's taught me a lot about training around injuries, I did all my training in the pool. So I bought an aqua jogger at the time, and I would do, like however long my run usually was that day, is I would do timed in the pool, and I would sit in there for 2.5, 3 hours and do my long run and stuff. But it's just pool jogging.
Yeah.
So I did that, got a cortisone shot, ran the race. Next week, run an even faster one. 2 weeks later, boom, get up in the mountains, got about, halfway. I think it was 55 miles in my run. This was a non-sanctioned thing. It was just like a thing we were trying to do. And just couldn't run anymore. Like my legs and stuff were torn up. And, at that moment, it's an interesting thing, because that is really kind of the start of the cascading, the way you load your body repetitively, and the way that you psychologically are, attached to it. So my running spiraled me down into where I couldn't run anymore. Next is coming, and what is next? Next is like, okay, now it's turning back to the weights. Like, problem solved. Ain't running anymore. Let's get jacked and let's get back into the mindset. And it shifted. And when I look at that, I realized like that was the exact moment of when I never realigned my body. I never put myself back into the baseline of the three pillars. If I would have put myself back into that baseline and recovered and taken some time off and realigned my body and realigned my practice and my goals and everything, I probably could have saved my body what I'm going through today. Now I love all this stuff because it's taught me more than I can ever imagine. And it gives me the information needed to be able to connect and truly be a teacher in being able to not solve the problem, but be able to help somebody get the problem solved. And so the running really destroyed down into the fascia, like all my hips and everything that was going on, but I took no time off. It was like straight to the next thing. If I can't run, I'm going to start slinging weights again. And then I went down started going down that road, which we're going to go to, which is kettlebell competitions, martial arts, getting my ass kicked in a boxing ring. It just kept going everywhere. And we'll get into that later.
Absolutely. Man, I love that you're willing to share this, because you're taking us through the stories a lot of people wouldn't want to talk about. You know what I mean? Like but they're the learning experiences. That's what has turned GreenStrength into what it is, because you've learned the hard way. You've done things the wrong way, like you've said, the unhealthy way, the way that you don't recommend people do it. You've lived that, and now can speak from a place of having figured out what you believe is the true path towards actual being a healthy human.
Yeah, and it's the path that I have the most work on myself all the time. I didn't come up with these and put them out there to yell at everybody else. This is like my own, I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing the same thing. I've chosen this field, or this field has chosen me, this position. So my skill sets now in this are being able to see when other people are going through very similar stuff that I was going through, and maybe it's not similar in the same sort of situation, but it's similar in the way your mind is making you exercise. It's making you make decisions and all those things, Um, another interesting thing I think about, like with the steroid stuff though, too, is like looking at this nowadays. My poor mother, she can't stand it that I'm pro steroids. Like I'm saying that I'm pro the appropriate usage of somebody taking the, doing that if they want to, the appropriate usage. I get to talk in context about that, just like I recommend the appropriate usage of alcohol, the appropriate usage of, I mean, everything can fuck us up. And I think we get these bad raps on things when we need to educate people and realize, like, no, it won't just kill you. It's not the worst thing in the world, but like it comes with consequences, and you better be smart. You better like use things correctly, just like all the other drugs that every one of us is addicted to something to some form or degree. So I think the most important thing I learned with that stuff is it's like it wasn't these drugs that did anything to me. It was my destructive self. And I used these as a tool. And guess what? I was using alcohol as a tool before that. And I was getting into some shit with that. So, you know, it's like one thing to the next. So I think if we're going to give anybody some advice of like between our little conversations here and some things to think about, it's just like start to look at the patterns of your exercise that are emotionally fueled, by something that might not be like something that might bring you anger or, that just that deep kind of motivation to where you're willing to push harder, because it's not harder that we have to push. It's smarter that we have to push. And part of being smarter is to try to just take some self time and start to think like, how am I exercising? Like, where does this end? And what am I doing? And can I kind of just step back from a second, look at it, and maybe put this stuff together a little bit better? I know if I could have had somebody during those times kind of slow me down and stop and educate me correctly, because I was willing to learn. I found out to learn a lot of interesting stuff, but nobody had just slowed me down and started to tell me like you need to balance your life out. You need to kind of, get things together before you get aggressive with all these changes.
I think it's fantastic. Perfect way to tie a bow on this one for now, because we got to come back and, we're leaving you at a point now. You've done the physique thing. You've done the get giant, and with the help of some drugs, broke yourself down, got to a very low spot, got to the running, took that on obsessively, and now we're leaving you at another low spot.
Yeah.
But it's the, like you said, it's the turning point.
A
turning point.
Yeah. You hear the term runner's high?
Oh yeah.
That's what we're talking about, dude. That's what we're talking. If somebody's like, well, I don't know if I have a crazy personality, it's like, do you get that crazy runner's high and get out there and continue to do it even if your knee hurts? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, Coach, as we get out of here, again, everybody keep coming back so you can hear the rest of Coach Luke's story and how he has taken all this experience and turned it into what GreenStrength is today, all that learning and all those lessons that you can put to work in your training and maybe shortcut it a little bit to learn from his experiences. Coach, hit him with how they can find you on Instagram and website.
At GreenStrength IV on Instagram, and the website is greenstrengthhq.com.
Check it out. Give him a follow. Please keep coming back here every single Thursday, where we're going to keep bringing you excellent content here on the GreenStrength podcast. And we appreciate you so much for being a part of the community. We hope that you will recommend this podcast to a friend so they can come in as well and join this community. Well, we're just going to keep learning and keep striving to meet all those GreenStrength pillars every single day.
For sure.